We might as well go ahead and get started. Our first item is administrative business. We have the consent agenda. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda? All right, seeing none. Are we prepared to move the consent agenda, Part A? Would someone like to move it? Thank you, Valerie. Is there a second? Thank you, Stephen. All right, your vote, Stephen?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Let's see what's on here. Jennifer?
Yes.
Mariah? Mariah, your vote on the consent agenda? All right, perhaps she's busy. I also vote yes. Next up, under administrative business, is the Pierce School project. Proposed vote to authorize the use of the construction manager at-risk delivery method for construction and pre-construction services. Helen, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Actually, the school building committee had a full discussion and presentation about the advantages of construction manager at risk versus the design bid build method of construction. And because Pierce is such a complicated project, we were highly recommended to go with a construction manager at risk. We've used that form of contractor and building system with both the Ridley School and with the high school. And it served us well in both instances. So I would recommend to the committee that we vote to sign or what is the actual vote?
Proposed vote to authorize the use of the construction manager at risk delivery method for
Right.
construction and pre-construction services. And to authorize the town administrator to sign all related documents on behalf of the town, and for the owner's project manager to submit an application to the Office of the Inspector General for approval to proceed.
Right, so there's a process that we have to go through in order to be able to do this. The Inspector General has to approve it. It's because of mass bidding laws, et cetera. But I would highly recommend it.
Okay,
So,
and we have our chair back. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was out in cyberspace. I don't know what happened. Thank you, David. So is it a motion? I think we have to vote
That's
on this.
exactly what David said. I moved.
Right. And do we have a second to that?
Sorry.
Thank you, Andy. Okay.
Suzanne,
Yeah.
before
go
we
ahead,
vote,
Steve.
can I just ask a question on this?
Sure. Yeah.
Ellen, what are the estimated costs relating to a CMR for Pierce? Do you know?
Yeah, so we don't know. The CMR will give us a guaranteed maximum price, a GMP, is what they call it. But at this point, all we have is the design estimates. And I think we had two different estimates. And the amount that we're looking at is not to exceed 220 million, but it may be less. So this is very early in the process to know the costs. We're also hoping that the market, by the time this goes out to bid, will be not as crazy as it is today in terms of supply chain. Does that answer your question?
I think it just means that I have more questions. So we're voting on
We're voting
the
to
delivery
allow,
method.
maybe
Go ahead.
I can explain it a little better.
Thank you.
We're not voting on a number. We're only voting on a method of construction. And actually, apparently, it's only the building committee that needs to vote it, but they felt it was important that both the select board and the school committee vote.
Okay, but the basic argument is for a project with this size and scope, a CMR delivery method is the recommended one.
And complexity. The other piece is the complexity of this site, because you're working in the middle of probably one of the most urban areas of Brookline. Even the Ridley School wasn't as urban as in terms of congestion around this site.
Andy?
Yeah, to follow up a little bit on that, I think another expected benefit of adopting this model is that we would probably have some cost savings from an acceleration of the construction timeline, just because demolition and site preparation could start to happen before a design for the new building is completely finalized. So certain parts of the process that have to run in sequence in the other model can run in parallel in this one. So overall, we should be able to open the new building earlier, which should bring down construction costs.
Thank you, Andy. I've forgotten about that piece.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we vote? Okay, let's take a vote. Helen,
Yes.
Stephen,
Abstain.
okay, Susan,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Mariah,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And David, did you do the first part, the consent agenda?
We did, yes.
Thank you so much. That's fabulous. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the superintendent's report, and we have lots of visitors that we are delighted to see and to honor tonight. And so I'm turning it over to Dr. Guillory.
Good evening, Brookline. A spotlight on excellence tonight. Our honorees this week for the Spotlight on Excellence Award could not be more deserving. The PSB School Nursing Team. In any year, school nurses are an integral part of the foundation that strengthens our community. Their intricate knowledge of the needs of each of our students is just phenomenal. However, during an international pandemic, the value of what they contribute to our school community is quite literally beyond measure. As the pandemic made its entrance, they have served as a guide for all of our families and students and staff, as a comforting presence for anxious students, and as knowledgeable colleagues who we can count on for steadfast leadership and advice. On a daily basis, our school nurses have worked to keep all of us safe and healthy. We have successfully weathered the pandemic precisely because of their efforts, and we are indebted to them for their tireless and skillful work. All of you know our coordinator of student health services, Ms. Tricia Laham. She is unflappable, she is wonderful, and she is leading an amazing team. I would like to turn the mic over to Ms. Laham, who will introduce the wonderful members of our school nursing team. Thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you very much for this recognition. It means a lot to me and to the school nurses. I will say we have all worked long, hard hours. It's been exhausting, sometimes rewarding couple of years. I personally am really grateful to have been supported by this amazing team of school nurses and of a very caring and thoughtful senior leadership. I'm really proud to lead this team of professional nurses, and I appreciate your recognition of them for their work and their dedication. I agree with you. I truly believe that it's the nurses' contribution that has made an unbelievable contribution to our students' success and our ability to be in school learning. I don't think that can be overstated. They have managed a myriad of responsibilities that came our way, many of which were not predictable and we could not have possibly imagined. The pandemic has consumed almost every aspect of our roles. It included contact tracing from the very beginning of the pandemic, collaboration with public health, COVID testing, vaccine clinics, communication to staff and families, data keeping for dashboard and DESE, changing guidelines, new protocols, synthesizing and sharing, explaining and defending. And even with all of that, there is still the student standing before a school nurse with a headache, an allergic reaction, a new diabetes diagnosis, a seizure, a syncopal episode, who still needed the care and expertise of our school nurses, and they received it. It has not been easy to bear the weight of others' fears and concerns these past years while navigating a global pandemic, while all that goes on in one's own life. I admire how our school nurses have learned and grown, adapted and coped, and helped keep our colleagues, students, and families safe, healthy, and informed. The Brookline school nurses have indeed been tireless, though tired, in their support of each other and our community. They have indeed made a difference. Thank you for recognizing that. And we have many of our nurses here tonight. I will start with who I see first on my screen, Mary Diamore, who is one of the Pierce school nurses.
Oh, goodness, Tricia, always trying to lead the way, huh? Go Pierce. I just want to thank everyone for recognizing us and for understanding what we have been going through over these past years. Now it's starting to accumulate, and I just want to give the shout out to all of my colleagues in this nursing group, because we have truly learned from each other, supported each other, and are here for each other. And that is so important to why we are able to do what we're doing. So thank you to all of my colleagues in nursing for making our jobs easier for each other.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Jill Seaman Chandler, one of the high school nurses.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for recognizing our team. And Tricia, thank you for those wonderful words that really encapsulated what our experience has been like these last couple of years. I would just like to say that for as hard as it's been, I want to point to some of the things I'm grateful for that I wouldn't have expected. And one of those things in particular is really getting to know all of my nursing colleagues so much better. I've been able to work with everyone across the district and supporting them as we've waded our way through ever-changing protocols. And so I'm grateful to have strengthened that team. And I'm also just really grateful to have gotten to know other folks across the district at different schools, and just see all the ways that people at every school are working so hard to do right by our kids. And I'm really proud to be part of this team. So thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ann Dewing, who is the Driscoll nurse.
Oh my God. I'm kind of emotional right now. Tricia, thank you. And so I just want to echo what everyone's already said. It's been a little tough. I get this way, so don't think I'm like cracking up or anything, but it's been tough. And I want to recognize my colleagues too, because really it's been something like we've never had to really deal with. And we dealt with it and we're dealing with it. And I also want to thank like my staff at my school, my teachers, my principal, my the kids, the parents. Not every day has gone like smoothly and without some little bits of conflict, but you get through it and you do the best you can. And that's been my motto this year. I am going to do the best I can every day. And that's what I do. And so it's kind of cool when some of the days like something good happens and you're like, oh, okay, that's why I'm here. So I'm I'm embarrassed to be here a little bit, but very honored. Dr. Guillory, I love all your weekly notes. And I just want to say thank you to the broader community, the teachers, the custodians, and everybody, because I really am a firm believer that communication and relationship is what make things happen. And so I think when we do that, we work best all together. So thank you.
Thank you. Mary Kilkelly, the nurse at Lincoln School.
Good evening. Thank you so much for recognizing the nursing staff. I believe that as nurses in the schools, we're often isolated. We're the only healthcare professional. And I think one of the positives, if there can be any, about this pandemic is that it's made nurses an integral part of the school community. I may not have known the 7th grade teacher as well as I wanted to, but believe you me, all the staff at Lincoln know me and I know all the staff. And also working closely with the custodians, which maybe wouldn't have happened before, working very closely with extended day, just realizing what they do. So it has been sort of an incentive for us to work more closely with each other in our individual schools. And also another thing is I've learned a lot about families that I wouldn't have learned about before, because maybe they could go to their pediatrician or reach out for something, and now they call you, and just individual things like learning what their living situation is so that you can help them isolate if someone's positive. It's just been a real eye-opener. And it's just shown how Brookline staff and families and all of us work well together to reach a common goal. So thank you for the recognition.
Thank you. Brianna Cormos, one of the Ridley School nurses.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this. It really is an honor. I started actually last September, so right in the heat of things, and it was great to be part of this nursing team. And they're really like a family, and they welcomed me in and so supportive. And it's just really great to be here with all of them and receiving this. And I just want to say, kind of to echo Mary, as much as the pandemic has amplified our work, it's also shown how much we care and what our role is and how we're there for all of our members of our community. So thank you so much for this. And I know we're all so deserving. Thank you.
Thank you. April Armstrong, the 9th grade school nurse.
Good evening. Thank you for this recognition. I truly believe we have an amazing group of nurses. I feel lucky to have such great colleagues to call on whenever we need to collaborate. I feel proud of the work that we've done keeping up with such a changing landscape. And like Tricia said, still, meeting the needs, the non-COVID needs of the student that, comes in to see you. And I'm very thankful for the strong leadership that we have in you, Tricia. Thank you very much. And thank you to the community for your support.
Thank you. Deb Troderman, who is our COVID testing nurse and float nurse in Brookline.
Hi, thank you so much for having us here tonight. It means a lot. I am the newest member of this team, and I do get the opportunity to go to all the different schools, which I absolutely love. And I feel really, really lucky to be part of this exceptional team of nurses. I think one of the things I think about during this pandemic, and even though it's been really hard and challenging and stressful on a lot of levels, I feel like, just when we're getting the hang of a certain way of doing things, there's another change, and we all have to, quickly adjust to that. And I think that's like a really important lesson in life, because change is the most constant in life. And it's given us the opportunity to be more flexible even when we don't want to. So we continue on and hope for the best. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Kate Donnelly, one of the high school nurses.
I don't think I'd be telling the school committee anything that they don't know, but the Brookline community is so fortunate to have Tricia Laham as their health services coordinator. And she is doing an extraordinary job leading and pivoting our practice and our policies and procedures. But it's been my privilege to work with this team, and it's extraordinary, dedicated team of school nurse professionals. The team continues to meet each new COVID challenge by adapting their practice to provide the safest in-person school experience for our Brookline families and staff. One thing that this has done for us is really shine a light on some of the inequities in healthcare that our families face, and the nurses have tried to lean in and provide opportunities for some of our students who don't have access to testing or vaccinations, and going that extra mile. So there is some silver lining in that we can continue to focus on the inequities that do exist and to provide opportunities for those families. Also, I have to say my colleagues have really helped out with the vaccine clinics and with testing, on their weekends and after school, long hours, middays, full-time nurses with responsibilities at home. They've really gone the mile. So I want to thank you for recognizing for the nurses for what they do best, and it's care for our students.
Thank you. Diane Mahoney Purcell from Baker School.
Thank you, Trisha, and thank you, school committee, and most of all, thank you to my dear, sweet colleagues. Much as I love getting to collaborate with you all, I can't wait until we can have a meeting after school all together again. As much as I maybe used to not look forward to those, I do look forward to those in-person days again soon. I feel like I can't capture anything further that my colleagues haven't already said. So thank you for the recognition that oftentimes goes underappreciated and overlooked, what it means to just have that personal connection to say, thank you. We recognize that you're doing something more and difficult than what the normal role entails. And so this really does mean a tremendous amount to me personally, and I know to all of my colleagues. So thank you all, and thank you, Trisha.
Thank you. Ellen Mullock, another Baker School nurse.
Thank you so much for having us here tonight. Like Diane said, it does mean so much to us just to have the recognition and not go unnoticed in all the things we've done over the last couple of years. Everybody has really nailed it, but I'm going to call out Trisha really just to say that we wouldn't have been able to do all of the amazing things that we've done over the last 2 years if it hadn't been for her strength and her support and her just kind of tireless leading of this crew of nurses. So I think a lot of everything that we've done, we owe to Trisha for guiding us and helping us get through this. So thank you.
Thank you. Megan Day, one of our high school nurses.
Hi, everyone. So grateful to be here and be a part of this team. Thank you for recognizing us and, taking the time to really consider all of the work that we've done over the last couple of years. We've really had to wear many different hats and many different times. I've appreciated the ability to sort of, I think nurses really, like acquiring new skills. That's like part of the jobs. There's like an adaptability there. So I have appreciated sort of learning more about public health and, what that looks like. And I think we did a really great job of really just building the ship while sailing it, and kind of continue to do so. But with a lot of grace. I feel like I've seen so much grace from people. And, when times are really hard, I think people's characters shine like very bright. And I've seen a lot of like really admirable things. So I think that's been really inspiring to see, and it makes me feel really proud to be a part of the team that we have. And I'm just looking forward to continuing our work and our relationships and taking care of the kids and the staff like we do so well. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Tara Anyosa, one of the Pierce nurses. You're still muted, Tara.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm really proud to be a part of this group. I think they're the people you want to be your, first responder in the school. They're the person that you want to be there for your kid when they're sick or during any crisis. And, we show up for each other. I can attest to that, you all have shown up for me when I've needed you. And I I couldn't say enough to attest truly to how caring and invested all of our school nurses are. And, you know, I'm grateful to be a part of this team. They're A+. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have several other nurses who are multitasking, meeting some of their own child care responsibilities. Betty Becker, one of our BEEP nurses, Penny Casey, one of our Runkle School nurses, Jana Young, one of our Ridley nurses, Hillary Janowski, one of our Lawrence nurses, and Janet Campbell, one of our Runkle nurses, are all here, but not on screen. So we are all appreciative of the recognition tonight. Thank you very much.
And we are so appreciative of your work, of your caring, of your stepping up when it's been so very difficult. Thank you so very much. And I also want to say that knowing that you are professionals and so caring, I think is a great relief to our families when they send their children off to school, where it's quite scary, but knowing that they are well taken care of at the schools is really a tremendous help and a comfort to our families as well. Now, I'm sure some people are going to say a few words, so let's just see who's there. Val, and oh, I'm sorry, Susan too. Let's go Val and then Susan. Go right ahead, Val.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you all for all that you do, and Tricia for leading such a great team. That's my school committee hat. My parent hat is really for Marianne Doing, who talked about community. She cried. I mean, I never thought I'd see Marianne cry. For 7 years, she's been part of our family at Driscoll, and I just wanted to thank her in particular. Before the pandemic, she provided life-saving treatment to my son no fewer than 2 times. And I know that happens across the district. And I wanted to just thank Marianne as a parent. Thank you.
Good. Susan?
So it's hard to follow, Val. I will say on a personal note, as a parent in the system for 12 years with 3 children, I consider myself also a frequent flyer of the nursing system. And you guys don't give out punch cards, but if you did, I'd have a lot of free copies by now, I think, from Marianne and Jill and many others. But just speaking for a moment as a school committee member, it's been my honor, it is my honor to have chaired the task force on remote learning. Coming up, I can't believe we're coming up on 2 years now, but most recently working with Tricia and all of you and Panel 4. And I need to say something about, I cannot say enough, let me say it this way, about just the stratospherically high esteem that Panel 4 members, that they hold for all of you, each and every one of you. I mean, this is a group of folks who disagrees frequently, but they have been 100% unified in just how the awe, the gratitude that they have for you since the beginning of the pandemic, and all of the different sort of balls that you keep in the air, making sure the glass balls stay in the air, and the balls that bounce are rubber balls and they can bounce back and they don't shatter and cut our feet. So I just wanted to convey also their appreciation, their admiration for each of you. And I can't say enough about Tricia as such an extraordinary and gifted leader. Tricia is not only a nurse, but she's been a manager. She's run financial numbers. She slices and dices and just is incredible. So we are so lucky to have you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Can Betty, I still? Yeah, Betty, your hands up. Go right ahead.
Okay. I had asked someone to read something for me because I was going to be picking up and dropping off my kids, but I'm parked right now waiting for them. So I just had written that it has been a really tough couple of years balancing raising young kids, their care during isolation and quarantine periods, staying updated with ever-changing COVID protocols at Brookline Public Schools, and maintaining my sanity. I thought if I can do whatever it takes to keep the Brookline students safe and in school, it will give my children in their school district, excuse me, and students everywhere a future
This is what kept me going. Another bright light through all of the COVID madness was the group of fabulous nurses with whom I work. They exemplify the highest standard of nurses. They're intelligent and hardworking. They all worked on the never-ending onslaught of emails day in and day out from parents, staff with questions, reports of positive cases or close contacts, keeping up with ever-changing protocols, talking through cases through patiently with angry parents, even despite everything going on in their own lives. I'm in awe of this nursing team, from the leader of this team, Trisha, to the newest member of our team, Deb. Everyone gave their all and truly deserved this recognition of excellence today. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Betty. Glad you could join us, even in the dark there. Helen, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'd like to echo the comments of my colleagues. I think I can't thank all of you enough for all the hard work that you've done. There would be no way that we would have had school for the last 2 years without you guys. I mean, you know, we wouldn't have even been able to get into the schools. So it's really, you know, we really appreciate it. And this honor is really well deserved.
Thank you, Helen. Linus, did you want to show the certificate? Oh, I'm sorry. Mariah has her hand up, and then we'll let you, Linus.
Thanks. I just want, to echo my colleagues on the school committee and say, even well before COVID, I had Nurse Mary's phone number, saved in my phone. And she would, you'd answer and you say, hello, because it's Nurse Mary. And she'd say, it's Nurse Mary. Everything is fine, but right, you get that FYI. And what you all have done though has just been so tremendous. I'm so grateful. And Trish, I want to say that what you read at the beginning of this, your speech was really lovely. It was really, really lovely. And thank you for those words. And thank you all.
Okay, Linus, are you going to show him the certificate?
I'm going to show him the certificate. But before I do that, I also want to add one last bit of commentary. I can't count the number of times in making my rounds around the district that each of your principals say unequivocally, I have the best nurse, I have the best nurses in the district. So just so that you know that they also recognize that hard work, and we see it every day as well. And so with that, Tricia and PSB nursing team, we present you with the Spotlight on Excellence. And it reads, Public Schools of Brookline Spotlight on Excellence. It's awarded to the PSB school nursing team with greatest appreciation for your skilled and tireless work to safeguard the health of our students and staff over the course of the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. And it's signed by myself as well as our school committee chair, Suzanne. So thank you all again. And thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. You are welcome to stay as long as you want, but you also are welcome to go and enjoy the rest of your evening. So thank you ever so much. And we will see you in the schools for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go on to the high school courses, catalog changes. And I see Anthony and I see Hal. Jennifer?
Can I do just a little introduction before Anthony and Hal?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. So we have 2 new courses for the high school this year, one from the math department on data science and social justice, and another from the visual arts department called Artist Books and Visual Journals. The subcommittee voted unanimously to support their referral to the full committee. And I want to thank our curriculum coordinators and Anthony and Hal for coming to our January 18th curriculum subcommittee meeting and making detailed presentations. Josh Paris, the math department chair, and Donna Sartanowitz, the visual arts department interim chair. The meeting is recorded and is available for those of you who would like to review it. And I really wanted to highlight the thoughtful discussion and the thoughtful educators who are working with such intentionality to really meet the needs of all of our students in designing these courses. So I want to thank head of school Anthony Meyer and assistant head of school Hal Mason, who are going to give you summaries of those. But if you're looking for more, including our in-depth conversation of the subcommittee, I would recommend you to the recording. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to all the members and special guests of the curriculum subcommittee for the meeting on Tuesday. Hard also not to shout out Leslie Ryan Miller, Gabe McCormick, and Michelle Herman for their work from OTL. So as Jennifer said, we have 2 courses and the credit really goes to our curriculum coordinators. I appreciate the kind words, but this is the excellent leadership of our department heads. So one of the courses that Jennifer mentioned is a visual arts course called Artists, Books, and Visual Journals. And it's a result of Donna Sartanowicz, who's our interim visual arts coordinator, K-12, really doing a listening tour and talking with programs and program leaders and department heads about how to best help all students access and be successful in visual arts classes. And so out of that was born a course that she wants to teach. And it is playing around with a genre of artist books and sketchbooks. The plan is for it to be a semester-long course for 0.5 credit. Just financially, there aren't budget or budgetary implications. Donna teaches a class as part of her administrative position. But the idea is that within this course, kids are learning a variety of techniques for creating artist books. As Jennifer said, you can see much more detail and hear much more expertise from Donna. But to me, it is largely about helping kids tell their stories. We all know all of our students have rich inner lives, and the opportunity to express those ideas through visual arts is really at the core of Donna's course. Hal, would you add more to that?
Yeah, I would say both of the courses we're presenting tonight are really looks at who's taking our courses now and what can we do to expand the interest level in some of our courses and the reach of some of the courses. So this comes from Donna talking, as Anthony said, with some of our small program chairs and different teachers around the school saying, I've got this type of kid, this profiled kid, and they would take the art class except for some of these factors, and this is what they'd be looking for in art course. And Donna really hearing that and being familiar with some of these, of some of the kids and saying, oh, let me try something different. Let me look at this as a different way of teaching art. So it's not, and the book is very specifically the mode that they're going to use because it's portable, because it will allow kids who may not be in school all the time out for whatever reason to continue the work and remain engaged and have that touch point with the art class and with the teacher. And so it's a very different structure than we might have with a drawing class or a film class or a photography class that might be more dependent on being in place and being there for the structured lessons every week. And we think it's a really interesting way to do sort of an outreach with art through this medium of creating book, journal type things. Donna, I would ask you to please go look at the presentation that Donna gave. She gave a beautiful example of what some of these books can evolve into from her upper level class, but it's a class that's open to anyone at any artistic level. It's just a chance to begin to learn that language of expression that Donna is so capably, has so capably taught at the high school for years.
Thanks, Hal. And then I would just add that she has also added an innovation with support from OTL around adding QR codes to our course catalog so that kids, when they're looking at our course offerings, can use the QR code to actually see the beautiful work that students do. I think it's one of those, you read the course catalog, my own children read it, they're interested in things, but I think they don't get the depth of understanding. It's when they see kids like them doing really incredible work. And so that's something that Donna is adding to our course catalog this year. Jennifer, I'm sorry, you were about to say something.
Oh, no, that was wonderful what you were saying. I was just going to also highlight, she really, integrated a lot of the SEL components of how art can meet a lot of SEL needs. It's just beautiful. I really recommend, viewing the in-depth presentation and seeing some of the amazing art that students have done in the different kinds of books. Is very cool.
Thank you for saying that. We can, let's go to math. I'm mindful of your agenda. So we have a math course from Josh Paris. He presented to curriculum subcommittee. It's a larger team, Danielle Tyson, who's a math department member, Danielle Rabina, who's a longtime math department member, and Chris Monschauer, who's a math educator and a special educator, along with Josh, presented to us what was also a pitch to the Brookline High School Innovation Fund, and that is data science for social justice. It's an unleveled course that will be co-taught, and as Hal highlighted with Donna's course, with the visual arts course, this is about broadening access. So it is mostly for older students, 11th and 12th graders. Again, it's unleveled. It is to be co-taught ready. It's really terrific collaboration between our special educators and our general educators. And it's, the hot topic is data science, integrating pieces of coding and computer science. And then I think what is really compelling is math education, math learning in context with rich context. And so it's based on the work of a Stanford math educator or math education professor. And then the idea, and that is just a data science course that they've created and offer to schools. The Brookline High School and the Brookline twist, which we all know we like to make things our own in this district, is to have the projects be much more specific and, as I said, contextual. So kids will go through some of the curriculum that the Stanford folks have developed, but then the project-based learning elements would be created by our educators. Hal, as usual, would you add more to that?
As usual, yes. We need additional math classes. We know that we need to expand our offerings and the breadth of our offerings, especially for senior year. It really is almost mandatory now that students take, it's not yet in our graduation requirements, but it's sort of de facto in the graduation requirements, that kids take a fourth year of math, and we know that we need to have more variety in that. And this class, Josh and his team has really come through with something that it's a variant, let's say, on a statistics class, but it's something very different, and it's approaching it in a different way and looking to apply that statistical analysis to social justice issues and look at societal issues through that lens with the very math-oriented way of seeing what is the data saying to us about these issues. It's something that we think is going to be really useful to the school, not just because it's a great class, but because we think that what's going to come out of this is some really interesting looks at a lot of the data that we have and some of the issues that we have at the school. So we're really excited about the possibilities of this course.
And in terms of budgetary costs, right now we're seeking Brookline High School Innovation Fund support for this. And so the program committee is in the midst of deliberations. We've had several wonderful presentations, but the idea is hopefully to have Innovation Fund support, work on this for a couple of years, and then see where we land in terms of it being a permanent part of our offerings.
Right, that would support the second teacher being in the room and the development of the course even further. And it's one of the ways that we've typically used the Innovation Fund model, as many of you know. It will draw some kids out of other senior level courses. It'll have some impact on Foundations of Calc, on Pre-Calc, on AP, but it also will be another good offering that again will give another avenue and an increased avenue. So we expect that it'll lead to more seniors taking math classes.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you want to move to accept these catalog changes?
Yep, I do, but I also wanted to say that the data science course and social justice really has a lot of project-based learning components to it, which I know is something the committee has been interested in, as well as really highlighting a lot of college and career-ready skills. It involves a lot of student voice and choice, which is really important. A lot of components of universal design for learning and civic engagement. So it just checks a lot of boxes in a really holistic way. So I just really want to highlight that those are really fantastic things. And I would move that we accept both of these courses for the high school course catalog.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Susan. Other comments, questions, concerns? Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say Tuesday's conversation was so rich. I do hope that anybody who wasn't there and wants to see it takes a look at it, because we had such great engagement, not only from Josh Paris and Donna Sartanowicz, but also Ed Weiser and Gary Schiffman gave us updates, which are not on our docket tonight. But I just think that these courses in particular give us such a terrific opportunity to make sure that more students feel a real sense of belonging, and like these kinds of courses are for them, especially students who may not have felt that higher level courses were for them. And I think that this just really helps those students find ways in the curriculum and is attractive to them. And I think this is just so important. We talk about attacking and dismantling barriers to all students achieving at their highest potential in STEM in particular, that Josh and Edward talking about, but across the board. And I just think that this really shows the power of our department heads and their teachers taking an equity lens, centering equity, and saying, how will this improve education for all of our students? So I just want to say a huge thank you. I'm enormously optimistic about these courses, and I just want to echo what Jennifer said. It really achieves a lot of the objectives that we've been talking about. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Seeing no other hands, I think we'll go ahead. Oh, Mariah.
Thanks. Hearing these course descriptions makes me want to go back to Brookline High School again and do it a second time. So nice work. I just want to make a couple comments about them. One comment, one question. My comment was just really how excited I am about this idea of the data science and justice. My day job is at Northeastern, and we have a new initiative in information algorithms and justice, and sort of just ethical computer science, ethical AI. This is such a great national priority, and I think it's wonderful to hear that we're bringing this here, and especially thinking about like inclusive computer science, inclusive engineering. It's wonderful. And I really like the focus on inclusion for the other course. I had a question about the other course, which was some of the projects that it sounded like are being developed could also, in theory, be alternative assessments, used as alternative assessments in other classes. If, for example, rather than preparing a paper, you were to develop a zine or something else for your class. And I was wondering whether there'd been any discussion of having some of these products sort of serve a dual purpose of perhaps being a deliverable for another course and an alternative assessment model, which again would speak to some of the inclusion for students who thrive under alternative assessments.
It's a great question, Mariah. Thanks for asking. I don't know offhand, but I would just emphasize what we heard from Jennifer and you heard from me, and that is that Donna did such an amazing job. I mean, we talk about listening tours and entry plans, and I nod and support and am interested in that. But in short time for Donna to turn around and create a course, I think there are kids who are deeply interested in visual art, and a program like ACE, where kids can pursue passion projects. I could see a world in which it's exactly what you're talking about, Mariah, that a kid starts playing around with a zine or a sketchbook, and then as part of their senior project within ACE, they're much more fully developing that idea. So the honest answer is I don't know, and that I have complete faith in Donna's ability to collaborate with department heads and program leaders.
It's great. And I guess my spirit is of thinking how can we continue to explore and push this kind of creative meeting students where they're at in terms of their interest into even other academic areas beyond visual arts. It's really exciting. So thank you.
Agreed. And my understanding is that we did give you a diploma. So as much as we would like you back at the high school, I don't know that we can allow you to continue as a
We're not allowed to
student or
double
start
dip.
over. I don't think
It was
so.
actually Helen who gave me my diploma. So
There is documentation.
there's
of that.
photographic evidence on my parents' wall. Yes.
Oh, that's great. Okay, let's take a vote then, if we would. Helen, you would just.
Once I stopped laughing, yes.
I know.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, Mariah.
Stephen,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
David.
I have Helen's signature on my diploma, by the way.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Mariah,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Andy, you have your hand up?
Yes, I know we voted already, but I was wondering if I could ask a question that's sort of for my information and maybe that of others, which is what is the complex instruction model that's referred to on the syllabus of the data science course? And is that a model that is also used in other courses at the high school?
It absolutely is. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but in the mid to late 90s, there was a structure to, we all understand that group work ideally is this wonderful endeavor, but that structuring it requires a great deal of support. And so in the 90s, late 90s, there was cooperative learning structures where each student in a group is given a distinct role. Those roles might rotate. The idea is to foster collaboration, to teach different skills. To me, complex instruction is the postmodern example of this. And it is really instructing in a way that brings the most out of all students and helps them be interconnected in terms of their responsibility to one another and their responsibility for learning. In terms of its history at the high school, we had a couple, and I'm going to forget the name of the scholars, and now my mind will go there. So I'm going to just leave it as we had both a science teacher and a math teacher engage in a 2-year-long fellowship in which they were studying complex instruction. And so it is very much a part of our 9th grade experiential physics program and very much a part of various math classes at the high school. So it's something Ed Weiser has supported in science and Josh Paris has supported in math. And I think, frankly, Jennifer probably knows it better from a classroom perspective in terms of what exactly complex instruction is.
I would just add that if you get a chance to watch the presentation, Josh Paris does a nice job. I asked him that exact question so that he could have like this nice explanation so that members of the community would be able to like to know it better. And he did a really nice job explaining it, but it's really in teaching the core, I think, is, teaching kids how to do those jobs of working well together. But he does a much better and more eloquent job than I.
And Andy, I'll just add to that it's if you're interested in more about it, it came out of the Stanford School of Education, I think in the 90s, and it's focused. Its tactics are group works, but its core philosophy is around inclusion.
Great. Well, thank you all.
Thank you. So Anthony and Hal, you can go to the rest of your evening if you want, but you're welcome to stay as long as you would like. Thank you very much. Those are very exciting courses.
Suzanne, before they leave, can I just say congratulations on having a successful last day at Old Lincoln School earlier this week. You guys did an amazing job, and all the teachers leading and just weathering the 9th grade sort of movement, and also just in this pandemic. So thank you. And I know everyone's really
don't leave
excited.
Janae out as well. Janae also has a key part of that.
Janae, yes, Janae was our 9th grade dean who led that building so beautifully. So we're so lucky.
Tomorrow's the first day at 22 Tappan?
No, we've got a
Wednesday.
couple more days of,
Oh.
3 more days of mid-year exams. So
Oh,
it'll
okay.
really be, we'll orient 9th graders on Wednesday, 1/26, and then they will begin on Thursday, 1/27. So
Oh.
thank you for all the support from school committee and district leaders and the incredible work of our faculty and staff, and frankly, the tenacity of our students. We came up with a funky model of cohorted travel, and it has gone incredibly well. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you to the whole team. That wasn't without a lot of hard work. So we really appreciate it. It looks fabulous. I can't wait to go inside and see it. So
Beautiful.
it's all great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going on to
Did
Sam
we
and
vote-
Mariah. Huh?
did we Vote the courses?
Oh, did I not take the vote? No, we took the vote.
You were laughing, Helen, remember?
laughing.
You said I have to stop laughing.
Sorry, sorry, guys. Sorry.
Having a moment there, Helen. Okay. We're going to the second quarter financial report. Sam and Mariah. Who wants to take?
Thanks,
that?
Suzanne. I'm gonna do a quick overview, and then Sam will take any detailed questions. I think 'cause that's the division of labor. This was presented yesterday at finance in detail by Sam, so I'm just gonna give the fly overview for people in the packet. So let me pull up my notes here. So the report that we received yesterday at finance that I'll be reviewing is about the budget update as of December 31st, which is the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And the headline is the projection that the budget will not finish in deficit. So that's headline number one. A couple other things, and that's great. And there's a couple caveats to that. One is that there's still some collective bargaining agreements that are unsettled. The out of district placements right now are within budget, but student needs change, and that could change. And also that there are major revolving funds, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a moment. We discussed the fact that the town meeting, the November special town meeting, there was an additional almost $1.2 million added to the school district budget for the year, which brought our total from the town from just under 120 million to just over 121 million. And what are the other things that I want to mention? Oh, two other big notes. One is that of the big revolving funds, BEEP and school nutrition look like they will not be in deficit. BASE is possibly going to be in deficit. Right now it's projected at around $200,000 possibly in deficit. We agreed that there was a request to Sam and Michelle McGlone, who's the BASE director, to come back to finance next month to discuss a little bit more about that situation. And then the last thing is that as we all know, there's actually two more things I should say. One of them is that a lot of our revenues this year, there was a significant portion that came from the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants, which are actually multi-year federal funds. And we had originally last year anticipated that they would be fully expended during this fiscal year to support our budget, but through a lot of favorable outcomes and strong financial management, it looks like there'll be some, right now it looks like about $1 million of that we'll be able to carry over to support next year, which is also great news. And then the last thing I want to note is that speaking of that financial management, Sam and Feng Yang from the town's IT office and team have been working on looking for additional external funds, and that includes they in the past quarter, in the first 6 months of the year, have identified, I think it was it $380,000 total, Sam, something like that?
Yes, approximately, yes.
Yeah, about $380,000 in additional funds from the state and from there's a federal cell phone providers surcharge that is unavailable for schools to access for programs, and so we access that money, and that's great. So all of that is contributing to our ability to shift money, the ESSER multi-year funds out into future years. So overall, it was a great report, and I'll leave it there for any questions. if there are any.
Mariah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns? Well, I think you did a really good job, Mariah, and Sam. I think your memo pretty much said it all. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I just, it's just a nice place to be where we think we've got it figured out for the year, instead of going into panic mode as we have in some years past. So thank you for that. Okay, I think we're going to move on to our next topic, which is the budget for next year. Dr. Guillory.
All righty, good evening, everyone. Going to share our screen here and walk you through the big pieces.
I just want to say thank you ever so much to your team for the budget book. It looks beautiful, but it also reads really well. So really, it's just kudos to you and the team. And I think members of the community who have a chance to look at it have found it easy to read as well. So thank you so very much for that.
Are you seeing the budget slideshow?
We are. We're just seeing
Yes.
it. It's not as full screen though. There you
There
go.
we go.
You
All
got
right,
it.
awesome. And so we'll walk through, and the team will jump in or interject as needed as we walk through the budget presentation this evening. So our agenda is we want to look at the budget, build the budget, how we built the budget by the numbers, and then certainly look at the budget rationale as well as the total budget, total FY23 budget. And we're also noting that all of our information regarding the FY23 budget is uploaded on our www.brookline.k12.ma.us/budget page. And as information is updated, it will also live on this page. So I want to begin with some thank yous, certainly to the senior team, to Betsy, as well as Mike Chan for their miraculous work of pulling the budget together. And then certainly the senior team, as well as their respective teams. The process that we actually used is Sam, our deputy of admin and finance, actually put out budget documents to the entire, all of the budget managers, and actually had them submit what their requests were for the year. So that's a process that we are utilizing, and we'll get better about this. We want to make sure that going forward, that we actually train our budget managers on budgeting processes and those types of things. So that's something that we're going to bake into our processes in the future. And certainly Aaron and the communications team also work with templates, soliciting information from our building leaders in various departments as well. So that's how all of this information was synthesized and pulled together. So we just want to acknowledge the hard work of the entire senior team, building leaders, as well as our department leaders, coordinators, and additional budget managers and program managers. So building the FY23 budget. So the budget book has a new look. What I shared with finance last night is our intention is to grow this document, or this type of document, into a teaching tool. So one that both communicates our values and what our beliefs are, but also one that allows people to sort of peek inside and take some of the mystery or demystify the operations or the finances of this department or the school department a little bit more. So our future vision is for our budget book to become a sort of a three-legged stool. I think it's the vision that I have for it right now. One that encompasses the education plan, one that encompasses the financial plan, and then one that also encompasses the facilities portion of the plan. So at some point, future forward, our budget book will encompass those particular entities. And then we're shifting from what I would consider the more traditional or the longer, the 300 to 400 page books, because we have this partnership or this existing partnership with OpenGov. So the budget book is the higher level. OpenGov then unpacks those numbers and details them out. And OpenGov shows the day-to-day transactional operations. And so that's a unique opportunity that we have and can leverage that for greater advantages. Our current district goals, every student achieving, every student invested in learning, every student prepared for change and challenge, and every educator growing professionally. Again, those are baked into sort of the essence of who we are. And with each of our senior team member goals, there are aspects or attributes of these nested into the work that we're doing this year. And the budget guidelines that committee voted on, we put an asterisk here to represent that we're taking now, rather than a year by year, is to look at these sort of in a 5-year swath or path. And those, we've paraphrased those 5 guidelines, and stating them here is to ensure equitable access to curriculum, build a budget reserve to meet the needs of the district, support the priorities of teaching and learning, continue to make resources available to support post-pandemic, or should we say ongoing pandemic, social, emotional, and academic needs of our students, as well as improving the life cycle of a PSB employee. So we are focusing on capacity building and strategic direction. So the specific actions that are supported in the FY23 budget request are developing a strategic plan, increasing our investment in curricular materials and resources, summer programming, investing in early education, investing in special education, growing our equity office, continuing to support the ongoing pandemic, the social, emotional, and academic needs of our students, maintaining healthy and safe classrooms, ensuring innovative instructional practices, and you heard a little bit of that with the high school courses, and then maximizing our operational and financial efficiencies. So look at the numbers. Sam, I'm going to pass the mic over to you and let you talk through the specifics of the numbers here
Thank you.
And the process for the numbers.
Thank you, Linus. And this is somewhat of a unique structure to Brookline, and I'll explain it as best I can. What Brookline has is the town school partnership, which predetermines an allocation for school and town in the aggregate. And so where that starts, walking back to the current year we're in, as Mariah had mentioned, our budget with the $1.2 million in that blue box, I'd hope I'd highlight the left part of the blue box on the bottom, with that $1.2 million that was given at or added at November town meeting, that got our budget through the allocation of that you see there, $121,066,547, which represented almost a 60% split of the available funds up top, which was 202 million. Taking that to F23, which is the year we're talking about, it starts at the very top of that column where Mel Kleckner, the town administrator, along with others, determine what is projected, planned for total revenue for the town. Largely it's property taxes, state aid, and the like. And then that is almost $346 million. Coming off of that number is what, I call it undistributed. Basically, it's expenses that are shared and cannot be allocated directly to a town department or a school or the schools. And some examples of that would be health insurance. Another example would be other post-employment benefits like contributory retirement. Another big category there would be debt service. That's what makes up primarily that 138 million rather. And so what's left as a straight calculus is this roughly $207.6 million. There's some, I'll call it noise, of 300,000 for allocated costs. And then when that's factored in, again, of that 207+ million dollars, again, the split is a little different this year. It's a little less to the school, a little more to the town. There's an asterisk below that I think might account for that in the partnership. But the number most important in that box is lower right, is what is right now anticipated and is in the bullet on the top to the right, is the town partnership school split based on these numbers at this point in time has allocated 124,022,929. As you will see, in Linus will explain further, what's determined to be the district-wide need for next year is $130,619,874, which currently would provide for a difference or gap of almost $6.6 million.
Thank you, Sam. So as we look at that 130.6 million that we talked about, so we're looking at our budget request here. Personnel, that amount comes to 113.7 million, which represents roughly 87% of the LEA. The LEA requested. Contracted services represents 12 million, supplies and materials 2.5, other charges 1 million, and equipment services 1.2 million, which gives us the total allocation that we are requesting at 130,619,874. And here's another way, another schematic to look at this in terms of a pie chart here, just to show again for the public to understand that certainly the largest portion of our operating budget sits in the personnel category. And if we break our personnel numbers down that are on the operating budget, roughly 66% are Unit A, 20% or so are Unit C, custodial services, 3%, vice principals, Unit B, curriculum coordinators is 3%, clerical 3%, central administration 2.7%, and then school administration at 1.42%. And Sam, walk us through this. Shows sort of a 5-year trajectory of our budget and looking at what our present request is, and then what we're even thinking about for an anticipated request for next year.
Happy to. What I like about this, more than I helped create it, but what I really do like about this is it gives you, and the way I would frame it is, I think, to tell the right story and provide the right context. It's where have we been, where are we now, and where are we going? And this really epitomizes it in that the center bar is where we are. And the previous 2 bars is where we were, and clearly the next 2 are where we're going. And so what is important to see here is if you look at the biggest part of the bar, what you're seeing, well, let me take a step back. In FY20 and FY21, what you see is in 20, that budget was built pre-pandemic. The pandemic started in March of 2020, in the last quarter of 2020. And so there was no way, and it's reflected here, ESSER wasn't part of the equation. That money didn't come in until F21. Some of it was allowed to be retroactive to 20, but the money wasn't awarded into 21, and therefore you don't see any of that green shading in F20. In F21, there was some ESSER money that reflects ESSER 1. So what you're and that's really the change year over year. By the time F21 started, remember, F21 started July 1st of 2020. You're talking 2 years ago, before the pandemic started, is when F21 budget was developed. And so nobody thought about it. It didn't exist. And then you see in the current year, two important notes. And I would say 23 is a catch-up year, and allow me to elaborate. The big piece of these bars, and all the bars, is the light blue. That's the appropriation. And what happened when the town, amongst a lot of cities and towns throughout the country, revenues tailed off. And so, as you can see, the light blue part was effectively flat. And I would argue lower, minus, before we got the additional $1.2 million. F22 was effectively the same as F21, what the town appropriated. And so the way that the town and the school department didn't have to lay off a bunch of people is that big green. $5 million is what that green represents, which is ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, to basically allow the system to tread water, is the best way I would explain it. That's one-time money, as Superintendent Guillory has alluded to. That money, it can carry for fiscal years past 2022. However, as he also indicated, when we both arrived, the budget that was built assumed that every last penny was going to be expended in this fiscal year with nothing to carry over, and there's not an ESSER 4 coming that we're aware of. And again, due to some favorable news, and I think to us being pretty good about managing the money we have and finding new sources of money, Mariah had spoken about, we've been able to take $1 million of those dollars and carry them forward. And that's why you see some green. Ideally, I think that's the appropriate color. You see some green going into F23. But that being said, if you look at the level of green in 23 and the level of green in 22, the amount that isn't is really having to be replaced by that blue. And that's why, if you look at the top of all these bars, it looks pretty steady year over year over year over year over year. It's just the blue spikes in 23 because the blue in 22 was flat. And that's just visually, I think that makes it pretty plain why. It's a bit of a spike in what we're asking for an appropriation, but it's actually fairly smooth when it comes to a 5-year trend. And then 24 is just our plan with some base assumptions, assuming some needs out of the strategic plan that will drive some of the 23-24 school year's budget.
All righty, thank you, Sam. And then, so as we look at our operating budget at a glance, I think this is now the graph or the table that represents what Sam just looked at in the bar graph there. And so you can see here the point that he made about FY 21 and 22, the LEA appropriation being essentially a relatively flat in those aspects. And then what was the difference that was used as the filler was the large portion of ESSER. And here in 23, we are projecting the use of $1 million for our FY23 budget as well. Sam, do we need to say any more there?
No, that covers it.
So then our 5-year operating budget history here, I'm going to have Sam, I think this is just another crosscut of it, but talks about it from the percentage changes. So if you want to take us through this one, and then I'll take it back from you.
Sure. And again, this really illustrates, again, I'd ask you to look more at the bottom blue bar across the bottom, where, again, when you look at the increases year over year with 20 as the base year, it's not as extreme when you look at it from the aggregate. You know, F21 was roughly a 4% increase from F20. F22 was roughly a 4% increase from 21. F23 is a little bit higher. It's about 5% over the 22, and then it's 5% again, 24 over 23. So again, that's where I meant it was relatively smooth. I mean, truth be told, category by category, not smooth, but and again, what everybody really is focusing on, and I would agree, the numbers are the biggest at the top, at the LEA level. But again, if you look at it, 21, 3.25, let's say on average 4% in line with the bottom. If you would have assumed a 4% in 21 and then a 0 in 22, then you'd get an 8% in 23. And if you average those three, it's 4% average. It's just, unfortunately, it's use the word payback, where the reliance on the one-time stimulus funds that allowed the town to basically level fund the appropriation. This is where it needs the backfill, and that's what's driving it in this particular year.
And so when we look at our new proposals for 23, we're looking at the requested addition of 18 FTE. For our schools, that would be K-8 paraprofessionals. Looking back at adding those resources back to I believe these are targeted for first grade classrooms. We have had, I think, extensive conversations around the needs for our ELE office. So we're requesting the addition, proposing the addition of an assistant program director. We've had conversations around our equity office and the needs there. So we're requesting the addition of an equity manager to support. And along with the equity office, we're proposing adding clerical staff to split between equity and our Office of Strategy. We're also looking at our student support services with the addition of an ETF for additional support for our students with special needs. Certainly looking at our guidance, our need for a K-8 guidance counselor to assist there. Human resources, certainly the added load that's there for an analyst. And then we have a request for an IT director, but this one may be held in suspense for the following year. So we will can discuss that one further at a later time. So our budget rationale, I think this is reflected in the executive memo that I shared with the committee, the recommendation, given certainly in line with what we just heard all of our nurses talk about their way of supporting the schools. But our current recommendation is to maintain our current levels of staffing and classroom configurations, and certainly where efficiencies can be made, we will certainly recommend and make those efficiencies. We believe that this will, again, assist with the mitigation of the pandemic impact. will certainly keep our district stabilized, which I think is also extremely critical. And then, as I shared, we'll grow and add where necessary. Our enrollment is on the road to recovery. We haven't recovered to pre-pandemic standards at this point. So we're still hovering around the 7,000 mark. If you look back at January of 21, we were at 6,800. In January of 20, we were at roughly 7,800. We again believe our budget rationale, our budget request is within alignment within our community expectations to provide an excellent educational experience for our students. And we again want to make sure that we're creating equitable access, process, treatment, and outcomes for students through anti-racist and anti-biased content and curriculum. And the work, again, with equity is looking across our system. So inspecting our hiring practices in every aspect of our organizational operation. And so again, I see these as a series of steps and procedures over the years. The main drivers, Sam, you want to talk through this? I think you've explained it, but again, just a summary here.
Yeah, this is a different way to explain it, and we don't need to go back a few slides. But again, as we had talked about for the LEA, the appropriation, 21 was roughly 4%, 22 was flat, and this is roughly 8% or $9.5 million, 9.55. And there are 4 drivers that are identified here. I want to highlight the first one, which is on the far left. It's $3 million that is due to ESSER weaning off of the ESSER. Again, we anticipated using 5. We in fact used 4, allowing or plan on using only 4, carrying over 1. 4 minus 1 equals 3. And so that's the gap that is needed to be funded in the operating budget. There's another $1 million for the 18 FTE that Dr. Guillory had spoken about in the previous slide. Then just taking who we have and moving them forward. If there's a step to move, if there's a lane to move, if there's a annual wage adjustment based on a contractual settlement, some bargaining units have been, one bargaining unit has been settled, the others, we need to account for that. And then last, and that's net of some monies that were we have budgeted for turnover, for retirements turnover. And then lastly is $800,000 that is allowing us, if we need to fund this to be able to maintain purchasing power for supplies and materials and services at the same amount and level for next year.
So again, Sam, you can talk through this one.
Sure. Yeah, and again, this is just a different presentation, and just the last 2 bullets are new. So, well, actually, I take that back. Let's begin again. So what we have talked about, and again, the first, so our operating budget, what we determined to be our operating budget, is a 4-legged stool. Prior to the pandemic, it was a 3-legged stool. Stimulus or ESSER is that 4th leg, which we anticipate in F24 will be back to a 3-legged stool. But the 4-legged stool is the $130,619,874. That's the big leg of the stool. We also, and this is other funding sources, but our budget that we need to operate is closer to $135 million, not 131. And those moving parts are special ed circuit breaker funding. What this is, for those who don't know, This is a special revenue fund where the state reimburses cities and towns, public school districts for students who are on IEPs, individualized education plans, that are high cost. And generally, with rare exception, those are for students in out of district placements. And the state, in Brookline's case, we have approximately 80 students in out of district placements. A lot of those qualify for the threshold to get reimbursement, and our anticipated reimbursement is a little more than $3 million. We talked about $1 million being left over into carryover in ESSER 3. That's the third leg of this four-legged stool. And the last is $500,000 that are in a revolving fund that we use to support the operations of the public schools of Brookline. And this is generated by materials fees that are charged to people who, that are employees in Brookline that have rights to enroll their students in the public schools of Brookline, but are not residents of Brookline. And therefore, there's a fee that is paid, and that's generally the amount of money that we utilize to support the budget. Again, those four legs total about $135 million. The total, what we'll call public schools of Brookline, is closer to $148.5 million. The remaining $13 million are those last two bullets. The next to last are grant funds, either an entitlement or competitive grants. Most of our money comes from entitlement grants, roughly $5.5 million of the $6 million. And those come in three buckets. One is for special education, the Individual Disabilities and Education Act, and funds like that. Early education and care, which supports integrated preschool, gives some money. And then there are title grants, which support Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, which support disadvantaged students. This is regular ed. Disadvantaged students where schools are considered Title I schools with a higher percentage of poverty, and also teacher quality through mentoring and induction, also English learner education, Title III, and technology funding. The METCO program, Metropolitan Council for Educational Equity, where Brookline has 300 students that come from Boston neighborhoods. That is we get roughly $2.5 million in grant funds there. And then the remaining $500,000 approximately are from competitive grants from the Brookline Education Foundation and the Brookline High School Innovation Fund. That makes up the $6 million. And lastly, revolving funds make up the other $7 million. The major funds in that category are food services, which is a little over $3 million. Brookline Early Education Program, where we charge tuitions, is about another $2.5 million. Those two funds comprise almost $6 million. There's the Brookline Adult and Continuing Education base of another, we project another $500,000, and the athletic fees comprise largely the remainder. Other fees are small in relative comparison. Those are the moving parts that comprise this screen.
Thank you, Sam. So again, another cross look, a table that shows what Sam just walked us through. Again, I won't reiterate it, but again, the Total operating is coming in at 135 million. And then when you look at the grants and the revolvers, it brings us up to the 148.5 million for a total FY23 budget. Last two things I'll share, I think in the conversation earlier with Stephen, we were talking about, again, my intentions are to share the entry planning findings with the committee and the public in March. And initially, I was recommending us starting up the strategic plan in the spring, but I think at this point, the recommendations that I've been getting from the consultants with whom I've been talking is it's better to launch it with the start of a new school year. So that's going to be my updated recommendation to the committee. I think it also makes sense, just given the overload that we're all going to be operating on as we get deeper into the spring as well. So just in terms of timing, the report of entry findings will be coming out in March, or shared out in March, and then the strategic plan launching within the fall of 22. So with that, we thank you for your attention, and we stand for questions or comments that you have at this point.
Okay, it always takes us a moment when we get lots of information to start to process it. So give us a moment, but Val's ready to go. So go ahead, Val.
Nobody else was, so I decided I'd go first. So first of all, I wanted to thank you for the presentation. It was in-depth and really digestible, and also the focus on equity and the equity lens on the budget priorities. Question for you, Sam. As you look at that FY24 and ESSER going away, and the presumed or the assumed LEA increase, what's our projected structural deficit for FY24 currently?
I'd have to go back to what Mel and Melissa presented, because they did do the out years through 28. Certainly a lot larger because it's cumulative, but I mean, the issue there, not that I don't want to give you an answer, but you know, that's compounded. And of course, a year from now, whatever the 23 will be balanced when we look at a structural deficit for 24. So I guess I would go as far as to say it should be similar. I would project the structural deficit, you know, assuming our budget is funded at the level that we've asked for, and then we're a year forward. I expect similar numbers, probably in the $6 to $8 million. Again, is what I would anticipate.
Thank you.
Could I just add one little comment to that too?
Sure.
Just that the other thing that we discussed earlier, being an unknown too, is bargaining agreements, and that would affect everything as well.
Other questions, comments? Yes, Stephen.
So first of all, another voice saying thank you for this budget book. Sam, thank you for your crystal clear presentation, which I feel like you deliver your explanations as if we're third graders, which is what I feel that I am sometimes when I'm listening to this, but I feel like I have a strong understanding because of what you presented to us. I have to ask about the elephant in the room, or at least when we get to ask about the elephant in the room. Given the fact that there's a structural deficit that we're projecting, given the fact that we may not get our full LEA request, what is the process for determining our backup plan?
I guess what and I've talked to Linus about this, and what I said is, I think now it isn't, and I looked at last year's presentation, and not to be critical, but I think it's about what the needs and the vision are tonight. But to your point, I'm hopeful that sometime probably in March, we'll have a much better understanding of the American Rescue Plan, revenue replacement, the requests that will be digested during the month of February, that we'll know a lot better. I mean, and that's my expectation, is it isn't May when we know what May is going to be. It's March when we know what's May going to be. And then I think we're forced to, my hope is that the allocation comes up and we don't have much to talk about with a gap. But that's when I vision we'll meet again, assuming if there's still a gap to talk about.
I thank you for that. I guess it's still not clear to me how even that process doesn't kick the can to some extent. You're saying, if I understand, that there are a lot of moving variables right now, and we'll have a clearer idea of where we stand in a few months. But there's, am I misunderstanding, Sam?
No, I mean, we'll know, I would think within, where are we? Today is the 20th of January. I would say, right, within 2 months, we really need to know, the options are, increased revenue. And again, I mentioned the potential funding source, which isn't a big secret. But that's one-time money as well. But at least, we're dealing a year at a time. And so I guess I'm trying to give you the short-term answer is in a couple of months, we're going to know, do we still have a $6.6 million gap? Do we have no gap? Do we have a $2 million gap? And then we're going to have a discussion accordingly, unless there's no gap. And then there's a longer range thing, but we're having to deal with it, at least this budget at this time.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer other questions. I just, that's sort of the timeline.
Can I add a little bit to it, Sam, too, which is that the ARP current revenue replacement value, if I recall correctly, is something like $6.2 million potentially, of which up to approximately 60%, if the full number is carried, and the PSB allocation would then be 60% according to the town school partnership, that could be up to an additional a little bit more than $3.6 million being applied to our budget, in addition to that of revenue. So that wouldn't change our 130, but it would change the 124, which is the revenues that have been allocated to us so far. And in addition to that, a much smaller amount, but I think is coming out next week, is the GIC numbers. Is that correct? Which is our insurance, our projected insurance costs for next year. So our before we get to the part which I think you're talking about, which I'm also interested in hearing an answer, is the vision for how, if we need to make cuts, that would happen. We still have a lot of revenue understanding to get clarity on before we think about the cuts. And there's potentially a lot of revenue hanging out there still.
I guess I would just refer, I would defer to Linus about a process when if there is a gap, what the process would be with respect to how priorities are, maybe going back to the, how would that go to then come back with with how we bridge a gap.
Susan, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to first say thank you. As everyone else has, it's great to have a budget book in hand. We haven't had one for a couple of years, and we're kind of on our way back to getting nice thick ones. So thank you so much for that. This is great. We're just sort of on the road back to some of that transparency, and I really, really appreciate it. I think I just want to raise what I said in last year's budget discussion, which is that as we apply any one-time money to any ongoing expense without knowing where the next revenue sort of, will come from on a sustainable basis, we're creating a cliff. And so I think one of the things that I'm observing in this budget, I'm trying to work through, is that for any FTEs that we add to the base now, and it was true last year, and I'll just say it again this year, any FTEs that we add to the base now makes the cliff sort of higher, as it were. So I think there are there's certainly a 1-year budget discussion to have, and there are certainly moving parts to that. So we've talked about GIC, we've talked about all the information we get in, and Sam, you just said sort of absolutely right, over the course of the spring, and that really helps us figure out where we're going to land 22 and how we're going to enter 23. But I think part of the question in my mind from last year, and I think it's still in my mind, is how are we thinking about additions to the base using one-time money? And as each time we add to the base, it just makes that cliff bigger. So there's a question about potential cuts for this year, but I guess I am trying to think in sort of a 2, 3, 4 year time frame, because some of the jumps in assumptions about what we will be able to get from the town may come through, may not. They're higher than we've historically gotten. And so I think we always need to sort of have us, at least in the back of our minds, of like within sort of living within our means, if as it were, what would that look like at a pretty reasonable sort of average growth rate, which has been quite healthy from the town, but lower than what we're talking about now. And I think for this year, really putting an inflation piece on that, because I think by the time the district gets to the FY23 budget, 24 budget, and frankly, even in the FY20, certainly by the time we're actually spending FY23 money, some of the inflationary effects may be kicking in. So I guess I'm not asking for an answer right now I'm not asking for a specific answer right now, but I do think that as we think about a multi-year vision of this, that actually does speak pretty directly to any additions we make now. And again, additions we made last year, as in, a dozen social workers and other important things. So I do feel the need to kind of put that back in. And I think it's important for us to have a plausible thought or explanation as to how we might proceed with that.
Thank you, Susan. Could we just go over this time frame just a little bit? Because on February 3rd, we will have a public hearing on the budget. And then on February 10th, the school committee is asked to vote on our budget, but we're not going to know until you're saying March, what some of those monies might be that would close that gap. And so I'm just wondering if you could think out loud, Sam, maybe, Mariah, whoever.
I'm happy to talk about this. So
thank you.
So what happens on the 10th is that we vote a number, which is basically our request to the town. And remember, this is a preliminary budget, and that number, just like all the numbers and everything, everything's changing, as we've talked about, right? A budget's ever evolving, but that is a moment in time that we are expected to formalize in a request. So we would vote that, assuming, and I can't imagine why, but I'm assuming we will vote the $130,619,000, et cetera, bottom line. And then we will continue to have iterations and processes. And then at some point before town meeting, we will re-vote a number again, essentially affirm a final number that we're going forward with to town meeting. And so there might be changes to the bottom line. As the budget that we received has allocations across the main subcategories, personnel, materials and supplies, services, equipment, and other, and those may also get adjusted. But again, we will re-vote. And so there'll be opportunities it's not like February 10th is the end of the conversation, right? There's many more steps to the process.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a question just looking at the budget book. We have on every school, there's a percentage designation of what the percent of students are that are considered high needs as defined by the state. And I'm wondering how we calculate additional monies for those schools that have higher percentages of high needs students. Is there something that we do to make sure that we address that in an equitable way? I don't know.
Title I way Title I money is, but again, for Brookline, Title I funds are about $300,000, which is a very small increment, but the premise of Title I is to provide additional supports for what we call Title I schools, which are schools that have a higher percentage of what you spoke about, Suzanne, high needs.
Right.
And that, so we can have deeper conversations about that if we're thinking about how we might apply formulas differently. I think at this point, as Sam is articulating, it's looked at the district level. It's not a weighted student funding type of formula as of yet.
Okay, so I guess I'd like to encourage us to talk about that, not right now, but down the road as we think about the needs of each school and their student population. Mariah?
Thanks. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Linus, for the presentation. I wanted to just reiterate that request for sort of thinking about, I mean, there's many levers that if you need to adjust the budget, you can think about, but, and sort of some of the obvious ones might be the things you've added. On the other hand, there's lots of other levers in the system. For example, you might choose to adjust the classroom sizes back up to closer to pre-pandemic numbers or whatever, right? There's many other ways you could think about this. And I think it would be helpful to give the school committee a little bit of insight into if the things that you have proposed to add are not the things that you would eliminate, then to sort of give a justification or help understand the decision for adding those things while removing others. That would be really valuable. As well as I would personally find it valuable to have a little bit more information about the new requests as well. I know that several things on the list have come up before in my short tenure. The paraprofessionals is one, as well as an assistant director for ELE. And it would be helpful to understand, for example, because it's my understanding right now, but that could be wrong, that the number of students in the ELE program have declined during the pandemic. And so we're adding an assistant director, and perhaps that's because the office was significantly understaffed before. And so this is a long-standing need we're finally addressing, but I'd just like to get a little bit of clarity around that. As one example, just, to have a little bit more backup on the needs that's driving those requests at this time. And then the last thing is, it would be really valuable to be able to have a sort of holistic call out of the things, the investments that are being made in the budget to address the disproportionality that we have heard about very vividly, and what we're doing differently in the near term, and how we're sort of positioning ourselves in the long term to be able to address those the disproportionality that we saw and we've heard about eloquently. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mariah. I'm going to jump in here because we have public comment at 8. So if we just take a pause, we only have one speaker signed up for public comment. That's Naomi. So if you don't mind, we'll let her come on because this was the time we said, and then we'll come back to this conversation. Is that okay with people? Just kind of a nod. Okay. Robert, why don't you bring Naomi on if you would? Naomi Schweitzer. Hi, Naomi, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, everyone. Is there an option to come on camera, or is it just audio?
I don't know, Robin.
It's usually just audio, but I can
just checking, make sure should turn on my camera. Hi, everyone. Good to be here with you this evening. Naomi Schweitzer, Brookline resident, Pierce parent, and a town meeting member and precinct 10. I was not able to watch all of the budget presentation due to another meeting related to town business earlier this evening, but did have a chance to review the letter with the budget book and started to dig into the budget book, and just wanted to make a few comments. All of you are starting to think about your deliberations around the budget. I want to first start by saying how much I appreciate all of you on the school committee for your volunteer efforts in leading the district during what is an incredibly difficult time. And to Dr. Guillory and your team and all of our teachers and staff, just great appreciation for, I don't even know what to call it, but beyond flexible during this health crisis that just is not going away at this point, and all of the implications it has for students, families, and staff in our system. So just lots of gratitude. When I'm looking what I see here in the budget, I just want to echo my appreciation and agreement for the priorities that are outlined in the budget letter. So if you look, I think it's the second page of it, there's a bulleted list that talks about investing in early education, growing the equity office, and right above that, there's a 1 through 5 list of the guidelines. I think these are well developed and thoughtful, and what our district does need to be focusing on. And I think some of the investments that are asked for example, investing in the Office of Educational Equity, given that is something that the district wants to center and should be centering. Janae Utaro is amazing. Everything's better with Janae, but she can't do it alone. And I know there's many other people working on it, but in terms of that leading edge, I think that's just a good example of where the values are articulated. And then there's a reasonable budget request to go along with it. I also wanted to echo, I think, some of the questions that Stephen and comments that Susan made, just talking about the structural deficit and what that looks like and where are the funds going to come from, and the ARPA money. I've been very involved in following the town's ARPA process, and I'm very familiar with this funding source with the work that I do professionally. And there are so many needs for that $43 million, including for the revenue replacement portion of it that is not just school related. And I share the concerns of filling a structural deficit with one-time funds. We have many needs that are related to our students outside of the school environment that impact how they show up at school, that could be addressed with some of the ARPA funds. For example, being able to provide funding for the Brookline Housing Authority. The Brookline Housing Authority has already or is going to be submitting a request for $16 million in ARPA funds. The planning department, I believe, has $7 million in requests, and we don't even know the full extent of all the other town departments. And there are also community-based requests coming in. Many of those requests to meet very basic needs of housing, food insecurity, emotional and social needs of town residents, including our children, outside the school day, but very much related to their well-being and how they show up at school and ready to learn. I am not necessarily opposed to using some of the ARPA funds for the school needs, but I just wanted to articulate it's a complicated equation that the town needs to figure out how those one-time funds are spent. And that leads me to my next thought, which is I haven't heard, and maybe it was said earlier in the evening during the budget presentation, the word override. And I'm wondering where your thoughts are on that, along with conversations with the select board. I'm acutely aware, especially as a Pierce parent, around the override that will be needed for the building project there. But I know that the needs in the school district are deep, and there are also operational needs on the town side that the pandemic has laid bare. And so I think it's time to have a conversation about an operational override as part of, not the only, revenue solution, but as part of the revenue solution that we should be talking about. Again, thank you for all of your work, everything that you're doing to lead the district. And again, thank you to our staff and teachers in the schools for everything they're doing during this time. There is so much, not only in terms of the basic health needs related to the pandemic, but the social, emotional upheaval, and I really do mean upheaval in our schools and children being behind academically, that I think this budget addresses. Thank you for your attention to that, and appreciate this budget presentation and the budget book, and the continued conversation around where we're going to be going with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. You are one and only speaker for tonight, but just to remind the public that we will be having a public hearing on the budget again on February 3rd at that meeting. Andy.
Yeah, so I just wanted to maybe get some clarification about Mariah's request to have things broken out that are related to addressing disproportionality. I'm assuming, Mariah, that by disproportionality, you mean not just the narrow sense of over-identification for special education, but also the racial achievement gap as dramatized by the MCAS results, right? So I wanted to make sure that that's how we're interpreting it.
The larger sense of the word, not
Yeah.
not just by MCAS results, but by many other.
So I think that's what we'd be hoping to see broken out so that we can understand.
Other comments, questions, concerns on the budget?
Well, I guess I was hoping for a reply to what Mariah had eloquently put out there. Unless you weren't looking for a reply, Mariah.
I'm happy to get a reply, but I also, even if it's just something as sounds good, we'll work on it. Like, I don't expect a reply on the fly, right? But for something for the future, yeah.
Oh, so though, I'm taking notes to all of what you're writing down, so we're capturing it all.
But do you think, Linus, just now that Val gave me the door, I'm going to push it open, that we can have sort of a breakout list of the things that are the actions that are being taken to address disproportionality writ large?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, Helen.
I guess the other piece too that you list that we list in the guidelines has to do with efficiencies and what was the other word? Maximizing operational and financial efficiencies. And I guess at some point, doesn't have to be tonight, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, where there are places that we might be able to be more efficient. And what sorts of savings might those be?
Other thoughts?
Just for members who haven't been here before, what Mariah was saying before about the budget and how it has different iterations as we go along. On next week, Wednesday, the governor's budget will come out. And that will be very helpful for us to know, what that means for the town, because that's usually the baseline of what the legislature will give. Sometimes, most times, it's much more, especially when there's a Republican governor. The legislature tends to put more monies into the budget. And then obviously the GIC that Mariah was referring to, I can't remember what number. Sam, do you know what number Melissa's carrying, what percentage?
I believe it's 5% in that neighborhood for an increase.
Right, and every percentage point, remind me, Mariah, is at 250,000 for each one?
I think the book said 323,000.
Oh, it's more. Well, of
Sounds
course
right.
it goes up because of inflation, sorry. So 320. So there are different pieces that will come into play as we go along. The town's numbers will get better too as we go along. So I think we just need to keep our eyes on all those different pieces as our budget comes to fruition.
Thank you, Helen. I'm not seeing any other hands. So I think this is a good start. I think we've got a lot to think about, both with OpenGov and with the budget book. And we will be continuing this conversation. When's the next finance meeting, Mariah? Is it after?
February 16th, I think. But one of the things we talked about yesterday at finance, I think Stephen suggested it, was this idea of being able to hold some office hours where rather than having it just be a public hearing, we could do a bit more of a dialogue. And so we started exploring that, seeing how we might schedule something. Hopefully we could get maybe one scheduled in advance of the hearing and to maybe just answer some questions, some sort of functional questions for the public, and then possibly hold some more of those. So there'll be it's not just, full school committee or the finance meeting. We'll be trying to set up some more of those sessions to give public opportunity to talk with us.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, the other thing actually I want to add is that, we have the finance meeting, and it's not just these office hours, but of course, there'll be advisory committee meetings about the budget and many other venues at which, including other committees, public hearings of the school's budget. So we'll be discussing all of those as well at the next finance meeting. But we don't, sorry, one more thing, but we don't control the scheduling of those ourselves. So we got to wait for other groups to reach out to us.
Right, this town school partnership comes up in advisory, as you said. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on then. We are now ready for Stephen. You're going to talk about an environmental sustainability panel.
Thanks, Suzanne. Oh, good. I see Brian and Ned are here. Robin, could you promote them to panelists as well? I'll just introduce this by saying I'm hoping this will be a conversation on the school committee right now in the short time we have slotted for this. You probably remember in December, Netta and Brian and Alice petitioned us to sign a petition on climate change. I'm not going to speak for them. I'm going to turn it over to them again in just a moment, except to say we've had several conversations over the past few months around what actions the school committee might take that would be impactful and that are within the levers of change the school committee can operate. So I'm going to ask Netta and then Brian to speak briefly, and then I'm going to make a short proposal to you all. So let's start with Netta.
Hi, thank you all for making the time once again to hear student concerns about climate change. Our generation has and will continue to be defined by how we're able to tackle climate change. The fact that the term climate anxiety has emerged to encompass a whole set of mental health side effects of the climate crisis speaks to the urgency of the issue. As a student myself, I often find it difficult to concentrate on my schoolwork when the world around me is clearly in peril. For example, the other day, as I was scrolling through my social media, a post about 2021 being Boston's hottest year on record popped up. The thought of the changing climate loomed in my mind as I attempted to continue my schoolwork. It was hard to stop my mind from spiraling, to stop thinking about the catastrophic effects on our mental and physical health, our food supply, and our survival. Based on a 2019 BHS student sustainability survey that 982 students responded to, 66.6% believe that BHS should require that students learn the skills necessary to address and work against climate change. 38.6% of respondents experienced thoughts or feelings surrounding climate that negatively affected their mental health in the past month, and 14.3% report that within the last month they have experienced thoughts or feelings about climate change that interfere with their ability to function normally at school. These numbers are staggering and cannot be ignored. The climate crisis is unavoidable unless we do something about it now. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks, Netta. Brian, would you like to say a few words as well?
Yeah, can you all hear me? I think Netta has already covered a lot of what I want to say, but I think that generally there are a lot of commitments from teachers to teach and address climate issues, and students also want to learn and care for the environment. But however, we are often occupied with worries and thoughts that we are alone in this. And for example, this year I've been trying to improve composting at Brookline High School, and I find that there is little to no organization in sustainability issues. And even though students, teachers, and staff, all of them carry very good intentions to recycle and compost, but we have no idea what kinds of trash should be put in each of the waste bin. And this is because there is basically no town-guided education programs to talk about these issues. Environmental education matters to me because climate change is a looming threat that is already consuming all of us. It is something that's non-negotiable. And climate change also intersects with racism and social inequity, and these cannot be addressed adequately without one another. So as Netta mentioned, over 2/3 of somebody agreed that some form of climate education should be mandatory. This is not even optional. And I think that there's such a high percentage of climate anxieties in the BHS student body is because we're not really pessimists, but there is really a lack of official support in this topic. And I think that having a panel can really make a great progress in uniting and supporting the work of educators so students can learn the skills necessary to adapt and be more informed in the age of climate change. And I hope that this group will also have a good representation of both students and teachers, because they're really the people who can offer the most insights to what happens at school. So yeah.
Thanks, Netta and Brian. Thanks for speaking tonight. I'm already disposed to be looking for ways that the school committee can act to assist with environmental education, but it was really talking to Netta and Brian and Alice, who's not here right now, that drove home the extent to which it's really already on the minds of BHS students. So the bottom line to me is that climate change is a massive and troubling fact of life for PSB students. It's the challenge of their generation. So I just want to make a few remarks. One is that across the district, I think teachers and administrators and community members have launched initiatives to equip students with the tools to act on climate change. And we've had environmental education courses and clubs at BHS. We have a sustainability orientation from our excellent food services director. We have gardening and composting programs at schools. We have outdoor education initiatives. There's a lot to build on, but I found that these activities are generally launched by enterprising and charismatic individuals. So they often live and die with the founders. There's no structural backbone to these initiatives. I also want to note that the policy subcommittee has drafted a sustainability policy, which I think is great news. I think we could do even more. I think we have an opportunity to provide some coordination and support for the activities so that for environmental education and equity activities, so that they might outlast their founders, they might find resources to grow, opportunities to scale, and even spur innovations that other districts might emulate. So I'd like to propose for conversation the topic of a community panel on environmental education and equity. The panel could be constructed along the lines of the panels established to support PSB during COVID. I think the success of Panel 4 shows how to leverage the unbelievable expertise within the Brookline community on a range of issues. And the panel would have the benefit of engaging that larger community, but also building a network of potential mentors and champions of environmental education and equity issues. I would suggest that a mandate for such a panel would be narrow, and it should be to develop and recommend a plan to the school committee on how we can meaningfully support and coordinate education, environmental education and equity activities. So this could include a map or an audit of existing initiatives, organizations, and actors, a strategy about how we could provide meaningful supports, and an action plan for concrete and impactful investments or actions that we could take. I also just briefly want to note that I spoke with the president of the BEU on the possibility of a community panel and whether we could include teachers, and she said that she was open to it, which I find encouraging. So thank you for considering this. I'd like to hear from you all on whether you think this community panel could be a good idea, and if so, how we might structure it to maximize its impact. Or if you think it's not a good idea, I'd like to have a short conversation on the topic. So thank you to Suzanne and David for docketing this.
Sure. Thoughts, comments, questions? Yeah, David, and then Mariah.
I strongly endorse this idea. I think it would be fantastic for us to have an organized vehicle by which to advocate on issues around environmental education, sustainability, equity. And I think that it can be very effective to tap into the expertise we have in our community. I would want to be mindful, of course, about not exhausting staff resources around this. So I do think we have to be careful about how this gets assembled. But I do think that it's very necessary and that it will allow a lot of these important ideas, some of which have already begun, others which will come imminently, to outlive their creators, as you stated, Stephen. So hopefully we'll be able to create this.
Mariah.
Thanks. I think I like the idea of this a lot as a panel of sort of experts that's modeling in the same way of the as you said, the panels 1 through 4. And I think that we also, I just would say that, for example, this past year and many other times, but just thinking of a recent example, the discussion of the Driscoll geothermal shows the value of having that community expertise to help articulate sustainability goals and needs in PSB, and how we can how valuable that community input can be in helping understand the different issues and advocate for them. My question is, how would this panel interface, harness, be different than, be similar to, et cetera, the other groups in Brookline that and other official bodies around sustainability, like the Climate Action Committee, Climate Action Brookline? I'm sure I'm missing like 5 or 10, but just how do you see this?
Sustainability director.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, exactly. And there's the sustainability director position itself, although that's a staff position. But just how this would differ from some of the other volunteer-driven committees and boards that exist to advise the town.
I think the short answer, Mariah, is that I would suggest this panel focus strictly on environmental education rather than on townwide educational issues. So its mandate would be to determine a way for the school committee and or the central administration to support and coordinate the various.
So it'd only be education as opposed to other environmental impacts in the schools?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, are you talking? So I thought about whether to include green building initiatives within the mandate of this panel. and I want to leave that open to this school for a larger discussion. It seems easy to include things like pedagogy, curriculum, content. And when I say pedagogy, I'm including outdoor education, food services. I also thought maybe you should just include anything that's in the sustainability policy, because if it's in the purview of a sustainability policy that we're drafting, then it should be within the purview of a panel to consider how we could support and coordinate efforts with it that align with that policy. But I'm leaving this for discussion.
Okay, thanks.
Andy and then Val, then Jennifer, I'm sorry.
So I guess given the intended focus of this panel to be just on environmental education, I'm wondering, so that would come under the curriculum subcommittee of the Office of Teaching and Learning, right? Or
I don't think
you're
so.
shaking your head. So I guess
I
my
think,
question would be, how do they not? How are they not subsumed under structures that already exist?
well, I think part of educational environmental education is coursework, is curriculum work and coursework. But I think if there's anything I learned from the Farm to School initiative is that the learning spaces around environmental education are much broader than just the classroom. It also includes the cafeteria. It also includes community gardens, composting opportunities, and so on. So I would think that it does go beyond the Office of Teaching and Learning.
Yeah, Jennifer?
So I'm a huge proponent of working on climate change and environmental issues. So I'm initially like a fan. I'm just trying to think through like what that would look like and how we would be leveraging the community's time and staff time to do something that we're not already doing. So I'm wondering like who would be on the panel? Would there be district representation on the panel? And my concern is just that, that there might be an expectation on the part of the members of the committee or the panel rather, that district staff might be able to implement some of these changes very quickly. And that may not be possible due to like human time limitations and the number of projects already on the table. So I just want us to be mindful of sort of what the very specific goals are and outcomes or things that we could expect the panel to do, and that they are like recommendations, and so that's just one sort of thing. And when you said education as sort of a focus for it, I was thinking things like curriculum and like, or these are coursework, but then as you were talking, it really encompassed more like food services and nutrition and composting. And then I started to feel like maybe we were getting beyond just, teaching and learning and into operations. And so it was a little bit greater than just that. And then I sort of wanted, a couple of people mentioned like all of these community groups that we have. And so while I agree with you, the really big point that you started with is that we have all of these things that sort of, not that they happen in silos, but in pockets of, and so like, I think for me, the goal would be like, how do we mobilize all those resources that we have to do something more than we're able to do right now? So I don't know what that looks like. I don't have a vision. I need to think more about this. But those are sort of the things that I'm thinking about. Like, what is the goal of the panel? Like, what do we hope, there's a need. How can we leverage the resources that we have to meet that need and to sort of fill that? And so I feel like I need a little bit more thinking and listening to other people think about this sort of out loud to help formulate an idea of what this will look like. What is the goal? Like what do we hope this panel will do? What do we want to see as a result? Like, what do we need? And how can we help people help us do that? People who know a lot about this. So I think that's where I want to go, is sort of, I'm thinking about what is the need that we're trying to fill? I think there's lots of needs. I don't think it's one need, and how does that work for us to be hosting that as like the schools? I don't know.
I would say,
sense, Steve? I'm sorry.
No, that makes total sense to me. So I just had a lot of thoughts at once. The starting place that I had for this is what is within the school committee's purview to do relating to coordinating and supporting environmental education initiatives across the district. And so I'm going to answer that first, and then let me say something about the output of such a panel. I look at someone like Roger Grandy at BHS, who has taken it upon himself to be extremely enterprising, to apply for grants, to generate, to support after-school clubs, to have courses. He's doing a tremendous amount. I think an opportunity that the school committee has is to determine how we can institutionalize some of the work that Roger Grandy's begun, so that if he burns out one day, I don't know if you're watching right now, Roger, or if he decides that he needs to scale back, or he leaves the district, that the initiatives that he began don't just die with him, that there's some sort of structural backbone to this. Because what a waste it would be if these initiatives are only charisma led. That's the first. So that's how I think. I'm always thinking about, like, Roger's my like my straw man, even though he's a real living human being. Like, I'm thinking, like, how can Roger become institutionalized in the district and the work that he's doing? But also, and this is responding to Andy again, but also what you said, Jen, I think that the readout for this panel would go to multiple subcommittees and to the school committee itself. If it has recommendations around course and content work, it would go to the curriculum subcommittee. If there's a policy recommendation or a way to extend or expand or refine the sustainability policy, it would go before the policy subcommittee. If there's eventually a recommendation of an FTE that would do some of the coordination work, and there would be a description of a scope of work that they'd recommend, then that would come before finance. And then, it, for a general discussion, it would come before the school committee. But the bottom line is, I don't think it's my position now to try to envision what the recommendations might be. I'm only proposing that we consider a mechanism that would leverage the expertise of this community to make a series of recommendations to us as school committee members, so that we can think about how we can institutionalize environmental education initiatives across the district. That's how I'm thinking about this, Jennifer. I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, I have two thoughts. So one, yes, Roger Grandy seems to be doing an amazing job. He's really motivated a lot of students and a lot of community members. I mean, there's a lot of people in the community who are really into doing gardening work and
Right.
promote gardening in the schools. Mothers Out Front has been really instrumental in our composting program. So there's all these amazing community resources. And I want to help to leverage all of that to make our schools the place that students need it to be, a place where they can have civic engagement and a place where they're learning about these things, because it is, as you said, this generation's, to me, one of their greatest challenges. But what I'm sort of thinking beyond that. So if we had some recommendations and people were from the panel were going to different subcommittees to present ideas, would we have the capacity to implement that and to keep it in a cohesive way, so that it doesn't become siloed and it's just, teaching and learning is working on this and food services got this and operations has this, or however it might pan out or be, or policy is working on this. Do we have, I'm just down the road, what does that look like as far as implementation and more our capacity to implement it in a meaningful way? So I know that's not necessarily in the breadth of what we're talking about right now, but I want the work of a panel or a group or whatever, however wherever this idea might go, I want it to be something that at the end people say this was a good worthwhile investment of time and energy and we did something good. So we want to be able to make some implementation. So I think that we need to think about that, what does that look like for budget implications? What does, we need to start thinking long-term about how this work could be implemented. I'm sorry, I'm done. I've been talking a lot tonight. I'm all done.
Mariah?
One possibility might be, I'm just thinking about what was successful in town within the sustainability community was the Sustainability Summit that was a couple of years ago. And my recollection is that they broke into, I wasn't there, but my recollection from hearing about it was that they broke into multiple, and I'm sure some people here were breakout groups and came up with some planning around some sub themes. Probably the schools was one of them. But in any case, that might allow for some to sort of, to Jen's point, might allow for some time-bound contributions and sort of strategic planning, leveraging the community for this, while also allowing the PSB to take the strategic plans and sort of consider how to implement them. And then maybe we can have, one of these a year, rather than having it being an ongoing, constant panel. Maybe it's a once a year check-in, there's a strategic plan. It allows us to get some forward pointing activity, and then all the different subcommittees could then take that work back and think about how that gets incorporated into their subcommittee work, during the year for future planning and so forth. But I hear accolades of how that sustainability summit has helped guide activities across multiple departments and multiple committees in the town going forward.
Brian?
So to address the question of what this panel should be able to do, well, we first started a petition, which we presented to the school committee, which then spawned the idea of a panel of teachers and students and other community members. But it all started with the idea of having climate education for high school students, for middle school students, and also for elementary school students. So we're hoping mostly that we have something that is implemented systematically, that it is accessible to students, because for now at Brookline High School, we don't really have not even a climate class that students, if want to, can take. I think there's one class only, but apparently that's not enough, and you can only take it in senior year. So like, we want climate education and other programs around sustainability, like outdoor education or other programs that can be something that is implemented more, I guess, like broadly, and not just like, as Stephen also talked about, Raj Grandy, who has a lot of ideas and a lot of things going on, but like, it's not just like in the spur of the moment from one person. I was also wondering, for Jennifer's point, like, are you asking that, are you afraid that this panel isn't going to be able to do anything, or because I'm just wondering like how much power the school committee has in actually trying to work out the things, because I think the panel is just for recommendations for now.
I think Brian, Jennifer, you can respond for yourself, but I feel like your question was about how does this slot in, not just within the town's initiatives, but also within the school committee's mandate for action. Is that right, Jennifer? That made a lot of sense.
I just want to make sure that, that we have all these amazing folks, right, theoretically, that we could have on a group of people. We have an amazing community. People are very generous with their time. And I just want to make sure that that's a good investment of time for folks, and that we anticipate that we would be able to take action on those items. So like, for example, I guess I'll sort of go out on the curriculum limb here. The school committee cannot mandate curriculum. If anybody disagrees with me or I'm speaking incorrectly, please correct me. But we don't have the ability to do that. So to Brian's question about like, what do we have purview over? We have conversations about curriculum, but we don't direct the curriculum. So that would be work. We direct policy and finance and supervision of the superintendent. Am I missing anything? We sign collective bargaining agreements. So that work in large part would go through the superintendent and the deputy superintendent of the Office of Teaching and Learning. So I'm supportive of the idea and the work, and I'm willing to engage in it. I just want to make sure that I clearly understand what this group would do, and I'm going to stop.
Yeah, no, I fully get that. I want to ask Dr. Guillory, actually, if you have any feedback on this as well. I also don't want to get ahead of anything that you might be proposing in your findings and later this in the spring.
Always a challenge to find the unmute button. So thank you both Netta and Brian for sharing, coming back and visiting with us again. So Stephen, when you and I talked about it, again, the big idea, the big takeaway for me is that that there is quite a bit that's already happening in the community, and how can we coalesce that? And then how then, because I forgot who said it now, about the resources, the finite amount of resources that we have in the district are already stretched thin. But at the same time, there's the call from the students to say, how can we do more? How can we get them access to more? And so how can we leverage or pull together what's already happening to see where the touch points are? And I know that there are some, at least I saw on my calendar, I think some climate group meeting next week, I think. And then Deputy Ryan Miller has talked to me also about some standards that are being revised. I think science standards as such that are also in the process of being revised. So there are many things that are sort of in the hopper right now, but how then do they coalesce and come together? And so that then makes me also think about, you know, the number of warrant articles that are already in existence on the town side as well. So there is an opportunity, I think, to centralize or bring these various resources together so that we can make sure that we're leveraging those, because I could see an opportunity potentially for some experiential learning, especially with Brookline's desire to be fossil free. But I think it's what, 2035, if I remember correctly, fossil free dependent at that time. So what might be the experiential opportunities within the community that we may be able to connect our students with through some form of apprenticeships or those types of things. So I think there's some opportunity to start doing some of that. And then I think as these other pieces come together, certainly the strategic plan is still, you know, it's a year off at this point. So there may be opportunities at that moment as well.
Netta, I know you've had your hand up, so go right ahead.
I think one of the biggest like bonuses of this panel will be that students will kind of have a where they can kind of work towards sustainability, because I think in a lot of the other work groups around town, there's like not necessarily that much of a space for students, or I haven't really been able to find a place where students can have like a strong voice. And I think that like teachers and students know exactly like what's going on at school. And so just having like this whole community or this whole panel of experts, and as Mr. Gilroy added, just giving students and teachers kind of like access to these other resources, I think that will just be like the best part of this panel.
So Stephen, we're gonna, you have something to say, David, because we're gonna move this on. We're gonna move along. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say that one potential thought would be to model this after BFAC, Brookline Fiscal Advisory Committee, which had a charge to spend roughly a year looking at different initiatives that could be pursued. They then put together a report. They had various subcommittees within. So in the environmental context, that could be one group that's focused on educational initiatives. Another group could be focused on operational initiatives. Then there could be a report, proposals that are presented to the corresponding subcommittees, and the community, the panel of experts, students, educators, and other stakeholders would be able to meet regularly. And that in of itself can be an education, and then move from there. Now, obviously, in terms of implementation, not everything gets implemented, but that's a reality we deal with in any context and in any subject. But at least we would have a potential blueprint, a potential path. It would be organized, and we would have everything more centralized.
So Suzanne, I want to suggest that I don't move this for a vote for tonight. And instead, I write this up as maybe a 1 or 2 pager for a fuller description of what this panel would entail and what its mandate would be, so that we
Okay.
could possibly take it up for a vote next time. And I
Okay.
just want to say, I appreciate and hear the feedback, especially I think the feedback to keep the mandate precise, narrow, and implementable, and so that it shouldn't overreach. So thank you to everyone, and thanks Netta and
Okay.
Brian for
Yes,
offering
thank
your
you, Brian
voices.
and Netta, for being here. Thank you. We look forward to your 2-pager, Stephen.
Okay.
Okay, we are going to move on to David, so to your proposals, your first readings on two proposals.
Yes, so the policy subcommittee voted in favor to recommend to the full committee 2 policies. The first one we'll be discussing is a pesticide policy. This is a follow-up to a resolution that we voted favorable action on, which was to endorse state legislation that would ban 2 particular pesticides, specifically glyphosate and 2,4-D. The second draft of the pesticide policy, which was the one that the subcommittee voted on for consideration by this body, includes mention of those 2 particular pesticides, that they could still be used as a last resort in emergency situations, but that otherwise we should make every effort to avoid them. I have been in contact with both the buildings department as well as the DPW. Currently, the building department manages our IPM program for anything that's indoors, while the DPW manages outdoor pesticide use. Now, Matt Gillis explained in an email that currently we are not using 2,4-D at all. However, glyphosate sometimes is used to remove poison ivy. He did indicate that the Parks Department could try to use other products to see how effective they are in order to comply with this policy if it's to pass. And also, I've been receiving emails from both DPW and the building department saying that they will have some additional feedback for us in the coming days, that they would like an opportunity to review this draft further as to how it might affect their practices. My personal opinion is that while I certainly want all the feedback from every stakeholder, especially staff, I don't think that we want to be in the practice of modeling our policies off of what we are already doing as a district. One of the purposes of setting a policy is aspirational. It's what we want to be. It's what we want to represent, not necessarily just trying to match our policies to what our current practices might be. So while I do think it's important that we receive all the information that we can gather, I wouldn't want that alone to lead us to either endorse or not endorse the version that's before us today.
So this is a first reading. We don't vote today, right, David?
That's right, yes. Just a first read. And if any of you have any thoughts on this draft, appreciate hearing them.
Nothing beyond what I said at policy committee, David, but I think following the students, I think this is a really strong policy commitment from the school committee, and one of several that we voted on recently relating to sustainability and the environment. So it has my full support again, as it did at policy. I know we're not voting, but.
Yeah, Mariah.
I had 2 comments on it. One was that it talks about pesticide use, at least as I understand it, focused on sort of building use, but not necessarily pesticides on foods. And I would be interested in, unless we have pesticides in foods covered somewhere else, how that could be addressed here, or if it's addressed somewhere else, if it could be referenced just to have that come up. Obviously, ingestion of pesticides is like a
an even greater human health risk. And then my other comment on it was that when I read the second paragraph, to me, I interpreted it as, and I'll read the sentence I'm talking about, that it prohibits the toxic pesticides, including glyphosate and 2,4-D. But that also, I liked this part about, and it's down at the end, number 2, about using the least toxic minimum risk. And I hope that we could emphasize that it's not just that we're prohibiting these, but really encouraging and not maybe up front also sort of least toxic materials. And to your point, David, about being aspirational, how I don't really like the clause where it says except where economically infeasible. That's vague and basically says like use the cheapest product you can, is how I sort of interpret that. And so to what extent we are being leaders in our commitment to avoiding pesticides that have greater toxic risk, even if there is a increased cost to doing so. That is not tight language, and that is a very messy response, but that is my response to this.
Susan.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the policy and the conversation, and not to get too meta, but I think it's important to have a shared understanding of kind of what is the status of what's our policy on policies, what's the status of our policies. We've been in different places over the last decade on that. Sometimes we say, this is a policy, once it's passed, the district complies, and that's what it does. And whatever the cost is, whatever the operational implications, this is now our policy. There are other times when, I think food services was an example, there was much more aspiration built into it with an acknowledgement that we weren't going to meet it in year one, but there had to be an understanding of the costs involved in implementing it and some timeline to implementing it. So I 100% agree with you, David, that we shouldn't only be bound by what we're currently doing. I just think we might want to be a little tighter on what status do we think our policies have, what status do they have legally, and what's kind of our intention about how we word things and what we put in a policy and what we put in other places. So I don't have a specific edit, but I think that's an important thing for us to understand when we pass policies. I don't think that's come up recently, but it might be coming up now, and it's definitely come up in the past.
Stephen and then Jennifer.
Thanks, Suzanne. David, I thought this was a really strong draft. I just have a question, which is, and I'm sorry if I missed you saying this, have you talked to Matt Gillis on this yet? I'm just curious if anybody sees any potential constraints on current behaviors or even potential future behaviors.
So there have been some email exchanges, yes, and he noted that we do not currently use 2,4-D at all, so he doesn't see that one as a problem. We do, however, use glyphosate currently to treat poison ivy. He did acknowledge that there may be other possibilities for treating poison ivy, and that's part of the review that's taking place now, and hopefully we'll have some more information in the coming days, both from the building departments as well as from DPW.
Okay, thanks. I think it would just be really helpful to know what kind of substitutes DPW would propose instead of glyphosate. But again, I think this is really strong.
Jennifer?
Well, I guess I'll start by saying I support both of the policies, obviously on policy subcommittee, and voted to support them and bring them here. And I was actually, I think Stephen actually got to my sort of piece that I wanted to have David sort of speak to, which is that we did spend some time at policy subcommittee. And I think particularly this year, we've been spending, and last year, spending a lot of time delineating policy and procedure. And so I think that's been really good work that we've been doing on the policy subcommittee, so that we're really trying to keep things in our lane. The other pieces that we've been asking a lot of questions about what the budgetary implications of our policies will be. So I just wanted to, that's at least my feeling about our meetings, and maybe David could speak more to that, but I do feel that's been the thread. So to Susan's point about like bringing up whether those kinds of questions and conversations are happening. I do feel confident that the questions are being asked. And so maybe David, I don't know if you have a different reflection on that, but I just wanted to speak to that.
I certainly agree with you, Jennifer. Those are questions that come up in the context of just about any policy that we review. What are the financial implications? What should be in a separate set of procedures rather than overarching policy?
Okay, David, you want to talk about the second one?
Yes, the second one is replacing the term headmaster wherever it appears in existing policies with head of school. Now, we already had a vote at a prior meeting just to indicate that we wanted to move in that direction. And now this is the mechanistic vote that will be coming up, not today, because it's a first read, where what I did was I actually went through our entire policy manual and I listed, so you can look at the policy agenda from the last policy subcommittee meeting and see each policy of our existing policies where the term headmaster appeared, so that you have an idea as to where the replacement to head of school would be taking place. So this is the first read for actually changing every existing policy to make that substitution. And ultimately, I think we'll vote for this in a consent agenda type format rather than having 40 plus votes.
Sounds good to me. I would, yes, Stephen? Oops, you're on mute, Stephen.
This seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Jennifer?
I just wanted to thank David again for going through systematically through the policy manual to find all of these references. Our policy manual is by no means small. And so I just wanted to thank him because that's additional hard work. So thank you, David.
Mariah?
I just have a quick question. When we were referring to when we were referring to the head of school with all the principals, it's all principals. He's not, the role is not called out separately, right? So it's just, he's one of the principals, but his specific title is head of school. Is that accurate? Just so I understand.
So head of school is referring to the high school only. Yes, that would be the title.
But the collective, or he is one of the principals though. Janae's nodding. Okay, and Linus. Okay, thank you.
Okay, David, thank you. Thank you for that. We're moving on to subcommittees and liaison reports. Who has something to report? Yeah, Mariah?
We had finance yesterday, but 8 of 9 members were there. So, and we did the big picture stuff already earlier today with the Q2 report and the FY23 budget presentation. So I'm not going to give a report from that subcommittee. I'm going to report on the accounts payable since the last time I reported, which was December 16th. There's been $1,698,377.33 approved. At the last meeting where we presented this, we also talked about having a backup person, and Andy had agreed to do that. And then last week we had occasion to deploy Andy in his backup role, and it went smoothly. And so thank you to Andy for that. And I just wanted to give one tidbit. I wanted to share one tidbit that I learned this week in my review, which I thought maybe everyone knows, but maybe they don't, and it was new to me. One of the bills that I signed off on was for, I'm not going to get exactly it's for a service that helps us process Medicaid payments. Is that right, Sam? Medicaid payments or insurance billing?
Yeah, Medicaid. So
Medicaid payments.
It's a biller who takes our packages our claim that we're entitled to under Medicaid law for services that we provide largely in special in the Office of Student Services, medical and special ed services that are reimbursed through Medicaid, through the Department of through DESE, and they.
Can I say why I was so excited, Sam?
Yeah.
I don't want you to just ruin my surprise for everybody. So what I found out, Sam told me, was that we pay them about $20,000, but that's in service to $500,000 that gets returned to the district by pursuing these Medicaid claims. And that's actually money that gets returned to the town, to the general fund. And so when we're thinking, it was very interesting thinking about this is a large revenue source that's returning to the town general fund to then be reallocated out. But it was great to see that this is a relatively small fee. I think it's 4% of the total that allows this very large dollar amount to come back every year.
Cool.
And that is my entire report on
Thank you, Mariah.
payables. Yeah.
Andy did report that it was a lot of fun for him. So, right, Andy?
I learned a lot for sure. Yeah, it's amazing just the sheer range of the activities that we pay out for every week.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that before we keep going?
Sure.
So first of all, I just want to say how delighted Mariah and Sam, every time you guys do this part of the report, at how being proven wrong again and again. I'm truly delighted. And I have to say that what makes it so delightful is all these little tidbits, little trivia tidbits. So thank you for that.
Helen.
So I have a question. That money, when it comes back, where does it go to? I heard the town, but where? Does it get divided between the schools and the town? Does it go into free cash?
I mean, all things being equal, it's part of the revenue that is budgeted in, when we talked early in the presentation of the town projecting $346 million of revenue, that piece would be part of it.
But I also did think it was interesting, Helen, that we were paying the fee to collect the money that then's going back to be divided out. So yes. On the other hand, the town pays fees for collecting real estate taxes that then get divided to the schools, right? So, everyone is collecting different shares of funds.
Okay.
But nonetheless, I thought it was nice to hear of a very large revenue source that the schools were enabling.
Well, good. Who else has a report? Thank you, Mariah. Jennifer.
We reported out today through our full subcommittee meeting on a number of the items that we had on our agenda at our January 18th meeting. What we didn't have today were 2 additional reports from educators and leaders at the high school. Ed Weiser came, he's the science department head at the high school, and talked about changes to the AP physics program that mostly affects 11th and 12th graders. So that was a really interesting conversation. He gave a lot of history, really great presentation. In addition, we had a preview on a pilot from Gary Schiffman, who's the social studies department head at the high school, talking about 10th grade social studies. And so there'll be some different offerings in a pilot version next year. So if you're interested in details on that, again, it's been recorded, really great conversation, fantastic educators presenting on really great big ideas, and really thinking about how they can make our courses match what students need and what's good pedagogy. So I wanted to just highlight that our next meeting has been rescheduled from its previously expected date of February 15th and will now be on a Wednesday. We don't usually meet on Wednesday, February 9th, from 4 probably till 6 this time. We have a number of items to cover. The agenda has not been finalized. So I just wanted to highlight the date change. I think that's pretty much everything right now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Helen?
So I'll report on 2 things. The capital improvements subcommittee actually did not end up meeting because we didn't have a quorum, but we did go and do tours of both the Baker School and the Lincoln School to sort of look at the facilities, understand some of the deficits in these buildings, and to help us get a better understanding. We'll probably be doing this with a number of the buildings, but we felt the two that was important to begin with were the Baker and Lincoln, and we will be discussing it at the next Capital Subcommittee meeting. The other piece, just to report out, because I realized our legislative forum was a week and a half ago. It seems like ages already. And I think it was actually quite successful. We had excellent representation from both the State House and from Jake Auchincloss, who from the our representative to Congress, and a lot of good discussion about initiatives that are happening both at the State House and in Congress, and how we might be able to benefit from them. Actually, one of the things your students from the group could look into electric buses and how we get them. And I'm really on a tear for that one. But I think it was a good session. I had very positive feedback. I got a call and email from two of the people who were there saying how much they enjoyed the meeting and felt it was helpful to them. So I think it was good that we shared our concerns and they shared theirs. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Helen. David?
The policy subcommittee meeting when we last met, in addition to discussing the pesticide policy and the change of the terminology from headmaster to head of school, we also discussed the physical restraint policy draft. The staff provided an edited version of the initial draft. It is about 3 pages in length, whereas the initial draft was 9 pages in length. We're going to be having further discussions about where that's going to end up in terms of overall breadth. A lot of that conversation pertained to something we were discussing earlier in the context of the pesticide policy as to how much should be policy, how much should be procedure. So that discussion will remain ongoing, and it will be on the agenda for our next meeting in February.
Thank you, David. Anyone else have anything to report? Okay, any new business? It's on the agenda. Okay, I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session. So I move to meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 31A, Section 21A for the following purposes. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Brookline Educators Union, BEU, Unit A and Unit B, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the BEU, Unit A grievances, and to discuss strategy with respect to potential litigation, EDCO collaborative. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining and litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. And purpose 7, to review and approve executive session minutes from the following meetings: November 22nd, 2021, December 16th, 2021, and January 6th, 2022. Do I have a second to that? Thank you, Stephen. Take a vote. Oh, we'll just start in the middle. Jennifer.
Yes.
Val.
Yes.
Andy.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Mariah.
Yes.
Helen.
Yes.
Stephen.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So we'll meet you in executive session. David, if I'm late coming in, you can just start with the minutes, approving the minutes. Okay, but I'll try and get there as soon as I can. Okay.
Excuse me, Suzanne, do you just want to
Oh,
announce that you won't?
Yeah, we will not be coming back to open session. So thank you, everyone. And thank you to the public. And I will see most of you in executive session. Thank you.